Absolutely.
How's it going to be to like edit your own stuff?
It's going to be weird. I'm going to be looking at myself and I'm going to be like, oh, I hate the way I look, or I hate the way I stuttered here.
Yeah, we can't do that though.
Yeah.
Mike, welcome to the Going All In podcast. I want to first start off by saying thank you for helping us, produce this. This has been, for me, this is my third time at this. I started out as the All In Chronicles with Big Anch. Then I went to Elevating Resilience, and now I feel like I'm a professional because you're editing it, and we're with Scott with Liquid Sports, so I'm excited. So we're just going to dive right in, and I want to know, who is Mike Griggs?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me so much, Ange. It's been an absolute joy and pleasure really being able to help you guys with this podcast. So even being here is an even greater
Awesome.
honor. So who is Mike Griggs? Well, first and foremost, and you and I were kind of discussing this a little bit already, but first and foremost, and I'd say this is probably the most important thing about me, is I'm a follower of Christ. And, I feel like in our society today, especially, we get so caught up in, what do these people think of me, or what do they think? And then that in exchange kind of turns into us, placing such an emphasis on what we do or don't have, and materialism things, and, like what we're doing for our jobs, trying to impress people. And that becomes our identity. And I feel like, and I was guilty of that at one point too, like even being a football player, for the longest time, I kind of let that be my identity. And it took me kind of being humbled a little bit through sports to be like, no, my identity lies in Christ. I'm a Catholic man. I was raised that way my whole life. Very thankful for my family for that regard. And, I just think that having that foundation is helped me to, in everything I do, whether it's been on, the football field or in my athletic career, or now doing the whole filmmaking route, or, even just playing guitar and being like a musician on the side, things like that. Or just, volunteering my free time, whether it's in food pantries or the church, like everything I do, I really want to use it to glorify God and to really show people like how good God is through everything I do. Like everything that I've been given and had the opportunity to do is really just as a result of his goodness.
Yeah.
And, it's kind of taken me a while to really see that. And now that I have seen that, I really want to use, my platform, however big or small it is, to really, use that and show people.
So, like I said just now, like having the three of you on this recording session, all saying the same thing, it just lights me up, because I was always, I don't want to say I was afraid to talk about it, but it wasn't my central focus until I've learned that material things don't matter. And what I was chasing after I left, teaching and wanting to build this big thing really was rooted in God. And then now being able to say it so confidently and aligning myself with those kind of people.
Yeah.
It's just changed my life to be bold about it. And, I also accept whatever anybody is doing. I just want to use my platform for what gifts I've been giving. And now that I do focus just on serving, like, I don't know how many people I'm going to affect in my life, but I know I'm living my purpose through what God gifts that he has given me. So it's like the gift of gab, the gift of empathy, wanting to change the world. So it's nice to talk to someone along those lines. Definitely. For sure.
Yeah. I think it's like so interesting too, like what you said, because we all fall like guilty of it. We all chase, like these things that at the end of the day really don't matter. And like being raised in like the Catholic faith, like there's a saying, a Latin phrase, memento mori, and it means remember death. And like I think it's so important to like really be like, you know what, like at the end of the day, like what we came into this world is what we're leaving with.
Yeah.
And the only two things that really last forever is God and love, right?
Yeah.
Because God is love.
Yeah.
So therefore, like through everything that I do, every interaction I have, like I want to reflect that love and that mercy that I've been given, and really like kind of, carry that on. And it makes such a big difference, because when you realize how insignificant we are as people, you start to see like, wow, like even though we are insignificant, our lives do carry so much meaning, because like every person that we come across, we have such an impact, and we might not realize like what they then go on to do as a result of meeting us. And I think that's like what's really, really cool about life, is you get to experience this journey, all the ups and downs, and figure these things out.
The patience part really changed me, is this faith over fear, of this space of, will I be able to have the platform I want to have to change lives? And I kept wanting to control it and push and push and push. And then it was finally like hitting rock bottom again and being like, you know what, this is going to work out the way it's supposed to if I just stay focused on each interaction. That's what made me think about it, And then like I met Scott, and then I met you, like with this podcast, taking that off of my shoulders to be able to then say, okay, somebody knows where my heart is with this. And then now I'm going to go focus on this, has opened the doors. Like, and you just want to scream it. And when people say that, like you think it's corny, but it's so real, because want like, I mean, in this mental health space, like I just always say that like, if you can give and serve, like I'm sure you've done some research on All In, but like the biggest like attribute with my ambassadors is using your platform for good. So whether that's talking about God or giving back, that is the best way that an athlete can feel good about themselves instead of focusing on themselves, which is like rooted in that, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So tell us, you played at RBC. Tell me a little bit about your football journey.
Yeah, so I mean, growing up, like I came from a very competitive sports family.
Okay.
It's interesting. Like my parents weren't really like they played and everything, but they didn't play at the collegiate level. And then it was like my younger brother, and my older sister. Like we kind of we competed like amongst each other like a lot. And like we were thrown into a lot of different sports from a young age. Like I played soccer, obviously I played football, but I played baseball, basketball. Those were probably the two biggest I played outside of football. And then I even swam competitively until about like 6th grade. I was like a junior Olympic qualifier, never chased it. My sister was the swimmer. She went on to swim at Virginia Tech University. And then I dabbled in wrestling too when I got to high school. So like I kind of was always trying everything, which like I'm so appreciative of, because you see like a different perspective in each sport. And I have such a new like respect for every single athlete, because I'm like, wow, like I know exactly what they're going through, and like how like every little detail is so important. And people don't really understand that. Like they spend like hours, like even like, for example, like wrestling, like the first match I was ever in, I went into triple overtime, and I'm like winded. I'm like, I can barely breathe. I'm like, bending over. I'm like, putting my like hands on my knees and my head, and my coaches are like screaming, because that's like the last thing you ever want to do in a match. And like I finished the match, and I felt like I was gonna like actually like pass out and die. And then like I'm like, oh my gosh, like coming from like the football side of things to now like wrestling, like I have such a different respect for those types of athletes, because I know how difficult it is. And that's why I love like this platform that you're doing too, because like people need to hear, like everybody's going through that grind. But yeah, like I think like what the coolest thing about sports is, like, when I got to Red Bank Catholic, I was very blessed to come across people who, were great at the sport before me. And now I'm kind of like trying to do that part of my life of like giving back to like the younger generation. Like I was very fortunate to, learn from guys like Liam Smith, who went on to play at Duke, and, even Quentin Nelson would come back, from Notre Dame, and he would, take me to the field, and he'd be like training me and coaching me. And I'd go home and like, I'd be telling my dad, I'm like, this is like incredible. Like who would have thought like this guy who's going to be in the NFL in a couple of years, like he's pulling me under his wing and like showing such an interest in me. And so that's what's like the best part about my athletic career, I feel like, was being able to see like how much care there is.
Mm.
Because, like not to say that I didn't appreciate my college journey as much,
Mhm.
but like you kind of see like the business side of things
Yeah.
in college athletics, because you go from being like the big fish in a small pond, really kind of being that,
Yeah.
you're the guy, to now you step into college athletics and you're like, oh my gosh, like I'm like literally treated like a piece of meat. Like I'm
Yeah.
either producing or I'm not producing.
Yeah.
They're always looking to, find that next guy. Like if, whether it's somebody they recruit the next year to replace you or something like
Mhm.
that, like you're always kind of on edge.
Mhm.
And, so you're not just playing for simply the love of the game like you are maybe in high school.
Mhm.
But it's important you keep that love in the game of
Yeah.
the game in college athletics as well, because that's like the thing that really keeps you going. Like when you
Yeah.
wake up and you're like, yeah, like I have to be up at 5 a.m. for, a
Yeah.
6 a.m. lift and then practice immediately after. But, I'm doing this because I love this
Yeah.
game and I love what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I was
That's
definitely very blessed in that high
yeah.
school.
And then you went to Harvard, right?
So I actually played at Colgate University.
Colgate, that's right. Mhm.
I played 4 years at Colgate
Oh,
University. I was
cool.
very blessed, got a scholarship, everything
Yeah.
paid for. And then with COVID,
Oh, wow.
I had extra
Yeah.
eligibility because we
Sweet.
played in that spring season, which was actually cut short because a couple of kids ended up getting COVID,
Oh, wow.
and we ended up having to cancel like our last game that year. But yeah, so I had extra eligibility, was able to continue playing Division One
Mhm.
athletics. Went to Sacred Heart University, got
Oh,
my
wow.
master's paid for there.
Wow.
So yeah, everything really
Yeah.
worked out honestly for the
Yeah.
better. It's incredible how such a hard and difficult time could
Mhm.
really end up being used for good.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, so I was very, very lucky really,
Yeah.
because there's so much that has to
I
go
know.
into it. People don't
I
understand,
know.
like,
It's so much.
and like even listening to like what you and Val were talking about a
Mhm.
couple episodes ago, like he was talking about how people like they put so much like care into being like recruited, and
Mhm.
I was like laughing. I was like, yes, like I know exactly what they're talking about, because I
Mhm.
remember like being in the car complaining
Mhm.
like with my dad, like how is it that this kid's getting offered when I was at the same camp, I did way better than him, like all this
Yeah.
stuff. And my dad's just like, Mike, relax, like it's gonna happen, and the right school is gonna come, like. And
Yeah.
um there's so much that goes into like recruiting. Like
I
you need to stay healthy. Like I've
know.
come across like certain athletes who I'm like, these are the most incredible athletes I've ever seen in my life, but they can never stay healthy. And
Mhm.
that's like what really stinks, is
Mhm.
because like some of these people, you're like, they belong in the NFL, they belong in like these professional sports, and one or two
Yeah.
career changing injuries and they're just never the same.
Yeah.
So I was very lucky to kind of, be able to, for the most part throughout my career, be very
Oh,
healthy,
cool.
and yeah, everything just kind of works out for
I
a
would
reason.
assume that you took care of that part, though.
Oh
You
yeah.
seem like a pretty hard worker. There's a lot
Yeah.
of prep that goes into
a
that I
hundred
think people
percent.
miss. Like I see
Definitely.
the high school athlete right now, and they're getting recruited to these big schools, and I'm like, wow, are you? I don't even know if you're gonna make it because you don't pay attention during film.
Yeah.
You fool around. You don't take care of your bodies. You're leaving here, going to eat whatever you want to eat, and that changes when you get to college because
Definitely.
you have to be at the top of that.
Oh yeah.
Rest, even your mental space. Like this, that's why like I have decided to use all in the high school space because
Yeah.
I'm like, it's tapped into a little bit in college. I would say it's not like perfect. The big time schools, it probably is better, but like I want these kids in this community to like have a little bit of this so that if
Definitely.
they are playing the next level, and even if they're not even an athlete, that they know how important it is to self-regulate, reflect, and do all those things. So, I mean, and as you know, like, so you leave college and then you went into a sales job.
I did for,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
It's interesting how I really got into that,
Yeah.
because not to say that these people might have been maybe dishonest about what I was doing,
Okay.
but it just wasn't at all what I was expecting, because
Mm-hmm.
like having these conversations with people, they were talking about like commercials and things like that. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, like I'm already, kind of doing that a little
Mm-hmm.
bit, like
Mm-hmm.
I've made a couple commercials in the past. And so I'm thinking like I'm going to be handling like the camera side of things and doing more like
Yeah.
indirect marketing. And then I get there and they're like teaching me a sales pitch and like sending me out into like, the streets of like Red Bank and like different places, like telling me to approach like strangers and be like, hey, like, like
Oh my
talking.
God, I'm the
Yeah.
worst at that.
Yeah. So like, and like I'm so grateful for it though, because like as much as like difficult as it was, like sales really teaches you so much, I feel
Yeah.
like. like I do think like it's good for people to go through
Mm-hmm.
like some sort of sales experience, because you learn so much, like so much personable
Yeah.
interpersonal skills, being able to communicate, and like all these things are so important.
Yeah.
And you're not just selling like the product sells itself.
Yeah.
You're selling yourself as a person,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where you're kind of starting to really build that confidence in like, this
Yeah.
is who I am. I can approach whoever I want and have these conversations with those
Yeah.
people. So yeah, I did that sales job a little bit, just kind of because I was feeling the pressure of like being out of college. I was like, I need money. I need to kind of
Mm-hmm.
go and start doing this. I'm saving up for,
Mm-hmm.
a new camera that's like $8,500.
Mm-hmm.
So I just kind of like took it.
Yeah.
And a couple months went down the road, and I was just like, yeah, I can't do this anymore. Like I really need to dive in fully. I need to go all in into
I
what
love
I
it.
want to do,
Yeah.
which is film. And I'm passionate about film. I love filmmaking, and I knew that if I didn't get out, then it would be much harder for me to pursue
Mm-hmm.
fully what I wanted to do. And so yeah, so funny enough, I started kind of connecting a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
relying more on, different alumni, and then they're like, yeah, meet this guy, meet this
Mm-hmm.
guy. And like you kind of get like frustrated, because you come across like different people, they give you advice, and you're hearing the same thing over and
Yeah.
over and over again. And I'm like, who's going to be that person to just be like, hey, like I have an opportunity, like let's
Yeah.
see what you can do.
Yeah.
And then sure enough,
Yeah.
Scott rolls around
Mm-hmm.
and was like, yeah, like actually like your background would be perfect.
Yeah.
We need somebody like that. And
Yeah.
for me, I'm like, bet, like let's do it, let's get to
Yeah.
work. And
Yeah.
I'm just, yeah, it's been so awesome like having
Yeah.
this opportunity, because
Yeah.
like obviously with the sports background now, being able
Mm-hmm.
to stay involved in
Yeah.
sports, but really being able to like I'm such a nerd for storytelling.
I know.
I love
I
storytelling.
freaking love it. Like
Yeah.
I just like make my husband's always like, okay, we're going out. Can you like not make like the toothbrush story to be
Yeah.
20 minutes? And I'm like, I know. I like to engage people. He's like, nobody cares. I'm like, they do when I talk though.
Yeah, of course.
I
Yeah.
just like love it. But it's cool because when Scott, like our journey, me and Scott's journey was really cool. Like getting to be vulnerable and honest with each other to figure out like what the heck are we going to do and how are we going to help each other, and then being able to like give Scott advice about like originally you think you want to go in a direction, and then if you really dig deep and figure out what is that you want and
Yeah.
not have to rely on anybody else and
Yeah.
take ego out of it, you'll find the right people will come. And me and Scott just kept saying that because I get approached by so many people and like everybody wants to give me advice. And when I left my teaching job, I was always like, I'm going to do everything my way. And then because I wanted fame, because I wanted money, I was like, oh yeah, you're right, I should do it like that. Or no, you should do it like that. And then finally, like having these conversations with Scott, I'm like, we are going to align ourselves with the right people. And when he
Yeah.
called me about you, I was like, oh my gosh, because it's really important that you are aligning with the right people at the right time. Like
Yeah.
this is a great opportunity for you. And like going back to being 24, like I had a choice to like go definitely into teaching, or I got my degree in nutrition. And I didn't go into nutrition, which was my love, because I was like, oh, it's so much easier to be a teacher. Like, I'm just going to stay in this space. And like, it's cool that you're taking that risk to follow what you got to do and to know that these are the steps you have to take.
Yeah.
Because the more I talk to people about their success stories, it's a journey. And this is the steps you need to take.
Yeah.
So like in my 2 years, it's been like, oh my God, why did I do that? And then I'm like, I needed to do that. Like I needed to fail, or I needed to have that opportunity where I made no money for 6 months, and then now it's like, let's go.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. So it's exciting.
I think like the failure thing is so important
It's
too,
so
because
important.
like you hear all these like great stories of
Mhm.
success, and like I feel like every single one like
Ugh.
sparks from failure, or
Mhm.
like somebody hitting
Mhm.
like rock bottom. And like for me, like with like my faith too, like I hit that point at one point too. I'm like, wow, like football's coming to a close. Like I'm not going to the NFL like I thought I was.
Yeah.
Like it took me getting like seriously injured, and then
Yeah.
being like, man, like I had like NFL teams coming to me. Like now
Wow.
these teams are gone. I'm not, really
Mhm.
like, I'm starting to see kind of my dream that I've worked so hard for my whole life slip
Mhm.
away. And
Mhm.
kind of like what I was talking about, like I let that be my identity for such a
Yeah.
long time, where I was like, even like with like, my parents' friends coming by, they're like, oh, you're the football player, right? And like now I'm like, man, like, and like there's a quote that I heard that I love. It's like, sometimes like God never makes anything bad happen, but sometimes he allows like bad things to happen, right?
Yeah.
Like he allows you to hit rock bottom
Mhm.
so that you can realize that he is the rock at the bottom,
Yeah.
right?
Ooh,
Yeah.
love
Oh
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
And like, for me having like those periods of time where like I was like, who am I? What am I doing here? And
Mhm.
then like chasing, like, wanting like
Mhm.
to be, wanting to feel like validation and approval from other people. And then I was like, you know what? Like none of that matters.
Mhm.
None of
No,
that matters.
none of it.
And then I realized, I was like, you know what? Like I want to make an impact on other people's lives, like right now, like here through my means. Like I don't really
Mhm.
care about like the
Yes.
multi-million dollar
Mhm.
feature film. Like I'd
Mhm.
rather make a film, like even if it reaches like 10 people and
Yeah.
it changes their lives for the better, like
Yeah.
I've won,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's kind of like, yeah, what
That's
I've
the
come to.
success story is like, and that's why I was
Yeah.
so stoked about you. I was like, wow, we could do so much in this little space with faith
Yeah.
and with like just wanting to serve. Like that's it. That's
Yeah.
what you want to do. If your heart's there, it's like, it's really cool. And I like just, I didn't even meet you. I heard from Scott and even like watching your edits, like interacting with you. It's like, you just know, like I always got worried about somebody else editing my podcast because I was like, well, they're not going to know what I want on there, but
Mhm.
you are right on. Like every time it's like, you know me, like
Yeah.
exactly. Even the reels that you put out, like it's really cool. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Definitely. So what is something that you're working on right now with the film and kind of like, what's a
Yeah.
vision for you?
So right now I'm actually, I have a short film that I'm very passionate about. I'm still
Mm-hmm.
trying to finish things up.
Okay.
Like it's I worked on it. It was my thesis film. Let's see, I think I shot it in maybe April or early May.
Okay.
Um, but it's titled Mommy's Boy, and there's a couple of different reasons really I got excited
Yeah.
about it. But it's so funny because like even like with the faith thing, like I remember just spending like kind of like multiple weeks like being like I don't know what to do for my thesis film. I don't know what the
Yeah.
next thing is. And then I just kind of hit a point. I was like, you know what? Like God, on your timing, your will be done, not mine.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever you want me to make, I'll make it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was outside just praying my rosary one day in front of the Blessed Mother statue in my backyard.
Yeah.
And sure enough, like this idea of like a mother-son relationship starts kind of like popping into my head. And I was like, wow, like, yeah, this is what it needs to be. Like, because I was raised, I'm very passionate about my family. I'm
Yeah.
passionate about my faith. I even like with COVID, like I
Mm-hmm.
stayed home in the fall semester to take care of my grandfather who was on hospice.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of like a very eye-opening experience for me as well, to kind of be like, wow, like death is real. It can
Mm-hmm.
come at any moment. Because I remember one day he's like totally healthy walking around, and then the next he's having trouble breathing. We had to call the ambulance.
Mm-hmm.
My mom's sitting there, she's emotional, like we're thinking he's gonna die right then and there. And I'm like kind of like getting like slapped
Mm-hmm.
in the face, like, oh my gosh, like is this the last I'm gonna see him? And
Mhm.
then I was lucky because I got like a few more months with him
Mhm.
being home in the fall semester. But so ironically enough, that spring rolls around, I took a sociology course called Death, Dying, and Grieving. And
Okay.
it was talking about how basically the course was talking about how like we put such a negative focus on death. It's like one of those unavoidables, like you
Mhm.
don't talk about it. And this class kind of encouraged you to be like, no, like think about it, like think like because it helps you kind of figure out who you are as a person, what you want to do in your time now,
Mhm.
and like how like all these different things. And so I applied like what I learned from that class to this film, because in my film, like basically what happens is a mom gets unexpectedly sick,
Mhm.
and she has a very strong relationship with her son, because she gets stage 3 pancreatic cancer. And because it kind of hit her so late, she decides to just let things run its course and to not dump the money into maybe
Mhm.
staying alive just a couple of months, but her quality of life decreases.
Mhm.
And that's kind of one of the things we talked about in that class, was that people do that.
Mhm.
um, so I wanted to show people like, no, you don't need to do that,
Mhm.
because it's like death is okay. And then
Mhm.
I incorporate values of faith and all these other
Mhm.
things into it. And
Cool.
the son gets like angry and he starts
Yeah.
questioning his faith, but they kind of have like a full circle moment. And so that's like what I'm working on right now, is that film. I really want to get that done soon. I
Yeah.
got sidetracked by like a couple of different things with
Yeah.
work now and all these different stuff. But I'm very close to pushing it out officially. I know I put like a trailer on my Instagram.
Oh,
I don't
cool.
know if you
Yeah, I
saw it
gotta
or not
see
yet.
it. Yeah.
um
That's cool.
yeah, so I'm
Oh.
working on that, and then I'm hoping to, I'm writing all the time. Like
Oh, do you like to
oh,
write?
I love writing.
Oh,
Yeah.
really? Oh, sweet.
So I'm always writing. I'm hoping to buy a new camera soon so I can
Mm-hmm.
continue shooting things. Because
Yeah.
what's cool about like the film industry now is you don't need like money is very important, yes, but
Mm-hmm.
you don't need like a huge feature film that's like 2 hours long with
Mm-hmm.
all the like props and cool
Yeah.
stuff to really get yourself noticed. Like a lot of these filmmakers sometimes can get discovered from just a 5 to 10 minute film.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I've been like, all right, I'll get my camera and I'll just go shoot what I can,
Mm-hmm.
because even if like none of it's any good, I'm going to be getting better by doing it. It's like
Yeah.
that repetition thing,
Yeah.
practice. um and so I'm always writing just because I love storytelling in general.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm hoping to continue doing that because I've been so like inspired by like people like say Damien Chazelle, who he wrote and directed Whiplash.
Mm-hmm.
And the film Whiplash started
I
out
love
as a
that show.
short film actually as well. It was
Yeah.
like a Damien Chazelle realized like, I'm not going to get the money to make this into a feature film. I'm going to create just one scene from the film about 10 minutes long. J.K. Simmons read the script. He's like, I'll come on and do the scene for you. He does the scene,
Wow.
goes on to be a hit.
Yeah.
And then sure enough, like, all these companies rolled around and were like, we're going to offer you the money to make this into a feature film.
Yeah.
So, and like you start to see that a lot more and more
Mm-hmm.
now in filmmaking. So, for me, I'm kind of trying to do that while, handling everything else with like,
Yeah.
work and different things like that.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, I do want to make those stories that can impact people's lives
Yeah.
for the better. I really want
Yeah.
to, because so much now is all digital.
It's
That's
so
all.
digital.
Yeah.
Like that's what Scott and I were talking about like, Val, I don't know if he told you, but Val and I want to do like a talk show
Yeah. That's
and
awesome.
we want you to produce it.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, you don't know that
I
yet?
didn't know that. I'm all for it though.
Yeah, because I want to do storytelling of like
Yeah.
bringing in people, but I want to like pick your brain about like is it like a talk show, like what is it? But then we were also talking about like you said, these documentaries, these
Yeah.
mini documentaries in this community,
Yeah.
in the Shore Conference, of stories of like multi-generational families that are coming out of the same high school.
Oh, yeah.
Or these programs like, I mean, I coach at Shore Regional, so I mean that program history is unbelievable.
Oh, yeah.
And then also just in my own space of like, thinking like I don't know if I wrote a book and then I had my TED Talk, and it's like really finding a way to tell like these small stories, because then when it goes onto the internet, you don't know who's going to watch that
Yeah.
and really like pick up on it. But if you
Yeah.
don't start small, like you said, then and it's so much easier now for people to see it. It's
Definitely.
like that's what everybody tells me in the space I'm in now is like I that was out there for 10 years, and then all of a sudden I got this phone call and it was like boom. So
Wow.
it's God's timing. So it's just 100%. Like just keep trucking along if it's in the right space. And I love that at 24 years old, you followed your heart on a mommy and son movie.
Yeah.
Because if you try to do what everybody else does, you're never going to separate yourself. And if your heart's not
100%.
in it, you're not going to generate any energy
Yeah.
for never.
And like that's like the thing too. Like I kind of went from thinking like, oh, like I'm gonna make like the next Martin Scorsese like mob film, and like I'm
Yeah.
doing like all these like different films, and then like so many, like I remember I met with this guy, a Colgate University alumni. His name's James Manos. He created Dexter. Super successful guy.
Yeah.
He's written Emmy winning episodes
Yeah.
on The Sopranos. And I'm so thankful for the conversation I had with him, because I remember like I showed him one of the films I had made like early in my college career.
Mm-hmm.
And like I remember like he just shot me straight forward and like really humbled me. Like I came in, I'm like, all right, bet, like I'm so excited to hear
Yeah.
what he thinks about my film. And he was like, I hated your film. He was like, yeah. And he's like kind of telling me, and I'm
Yeah.
like sitting there, I was like, okay, yeah. And I'm like,
Yeah.
taking in this great conversation with him. And the one piece of advice that he really like gave me that I feel like is so important, he was like, if you want to be a great writer, he's like, you need experience. He's like, you need to feel these emotions that you write into your characters. Like you need to know what it feels like to go out and get your heart broken, or to be cheated on, and like all these different things. And I was like sitting there, I was like, you know what, like he's so right, because I haven't had any of those experiences. So then in my my thesis film, I was like, I want to write about something that's actually close to home, something I've experienced. And even if I maybe slightly change certain details here and there, like I did live through that film, and that is like in a sense kind of me. And
That's
so
neat.
that's why I was like, you know what, this is the one. And then just seeing like the way all the kind of pieces, of the puzzle came together,
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, like this is all like God. This is God's
Yeah.
timing right here. Because
Yeah.
really, like I didn't do anything,
Yeah.
other than just kind of be patient and let things
Hmm.
fall into place, and
Yeah.
talk about who I was really.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah.
So how would you define resilience then? Now that you're
Yeah.
learning all this.
Yeah. I
Hmm.
mean, I think like resilience is really just, I think it's just like it's kind of like the Rocky 5 thing, like
Yeah.
like how much can like how, it's not about how hard you hit, but how
Hmm.
much like or how hard you can get hit and just keep moving forward.
Yeah.
Like resilience is like having that consistent mindset of waking up each day and being like, there's going to be good and bad throughout
Hmm.
everything you do. Like
Hmm.
my dad always says, like peaks and valleys, and
Hmm.
one of these days like you're riding the peak, feeling great, but like a couple days later you're going to be stuck in a valley, and like you're like, how do I get out of this? And
Hmm.
you just need to keep that same consistent mindset of like, I'm going to push through no matter what. I'm not going to change up anything in what I'm doing, because as long as I'm falling back on working hard and having that positive mindset, and really just that faith, right,
Yeah.
and God, like I know
Sure.
everything's going to work out.
Yeah.
um and that's like the main thing for me too, is like
Yeah.
that total, like once I totally like surrendered and
Yeah.
was like, you know what, like I can't do this anymore, God, I'm leaving this in
Yeah.
your hands, like
Yeah.
take it from me. Like that was like the like the
Hmm.
sigh of relief, like I'm
Mm.
good now. Because um you start to realize like, okay, if I get passed up on a job or something, it's because God has something better planned
Hmm.
for me,
There's
right?
always
And
reason.
like that's like that trust and like that
Hmm.
full surrender of like being like, I don't have to worry, like I'm gonna go out and do the very best that I can.
Hmm.
But if it doesn't go the way I planned or the way I expected it, it's totally okay, because I
Yeah.
know it's all gonna work out. And that's
Yeah.
what's like really, really cool about like
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're 24, and how do you, I mean, obviously it's your faith, right? But like dig a little deeper. How do you see like your friends maybe like having
Yeah.
jobs, making more money and stuff like that? How do you maintain like this faith of knowing that your time will come?
Yeah, it's so
It
funny you say that too, because
Yeah.
like even like getting out of college, right? Like I
Mhm.
remember like, like going to film school and then like being like, all right, like I'm gonna hold out on like getting like
Mhm.
a job. And like, so many of my friends, they went on to be like, businessmen.
Of
They're
course.
making
Yeah.
six figures, they got like brand new watches and like a, pretty girlfriend. And my dad's like, Mike, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm like, Dad, like just give me some time. Like it's, I
Yeah.
know it's gonna work out. Like just
Yeah.
just trust me on this. And so for me, like I even remember like one time like I was getting like a little stressed about it too. And like I
Yeah.
went to confession, I was talking with my priest about it, and I was like, I see where they're coming from, Father. I was like, because like, yeah, like I do kind of get worried. Like I need a job, I need money, I need
Yeah.
to kind of start growing up a little bit. And he just like, I remember he told me, he was like, okay, Mike, he's like, now if you were to die tomorrow, what does that all matter?
Oh wow.
And I was just like,
Mhm.
okay. And
Mhm.
he's like, you're focusing on the things of the world, right? But you need to focus on like the things of like heaven, right? Like kind of like
Mhm.
how like in the Bible, what Jesus talks about, like do not
Yeah.
store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust consume, but store up for yourself treasures in heaven.
Yeah.
Um, and like that's when I was like, okay. And then he was like, focus on what you can do now that can change somebody's life. So right when that happened, I was like, okay, I'm gonna go to. I went to Fulfill. I started volunteering my free
Mhm.
time, helping out with
Mhm.
the food pantry, bagging food, and all these different stuff. Because I was like, you know what, like by doing this now and focusing on what I can now, it's all going to work out in God's timing. And
Mhm. It's awesome.
yeah, and so eventually, and like I kept, believe me, I kept applying to different jobs. I kept,
Yeah.
focusing on handling what I could, but I wasn't going to stress so much about being
Yeah.
like, I need to jump at the first thing right now. Because sure enough, that happened with that sales
Mhm.
job I worked.
Mhm.
And it wasn't me.
Mhm.
And and certainly God used that poor decision
Mhm.
on my end to use it for good, to now lead me
Yeah.
to where I am now.
Yeah.
So it's really just understanding that, no matter what decision you make, um you have to be patient. You
Yeah.
got to be patient in everything you do. And b, just trust.
Yeah.
You
Just
got to,
trust.
you got to trust that everything's going to work out for the
Yeah.
better.
I want to cry because I'm like, I'm so happy that
Yeah.
our paths didn't just cross, but now we're walking on the same one. Because it's like, just to tell you at 24, like you're changing lives, like
Oh,
100%. Like even
yeah.
with me, you're giving me the hope to be like, okay, let's go. Because, I'm 47 and start over again. And I'm like, all right, like I can, do this one
Yeah,
step at a time. And
definitely.
it's neat. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. So what would you tell your freshman year Mike Griggs at RBC? What advice would you give that dude?
Um, I would tell him, continue to put your all into everything you do. I wouldn't tell him like, hey, this is how things are going to pan out,
Yeah.
because I feel like kind of coming to that realization myself,
Yeah.
like, is so important to really
That's
kind of
cool.
get that growth and
Yeah.
change. I would tell him like, continue to work hard in all that you do, but I would also tell him, don't, like, do it more so, right? Don't do it because you care about what other people think or what they might say. Do it for yourself,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And I would just like, because I feel like, so much of us, like, we just get caught up in like, what are these people going to think about me?
Yeah.
And we let that drive,
Mm-hmm.
ourselves and all these different things, and then we end up, so unhappy
I
and
know.
miserable.
You see it with these kids in social media. It's such a
Yeah, it's
comparison
all
game.
it's all vanity.
It's all
It's
vanity.
all vanity. Like,
It's so
social
brutal.
media, like, I even find myself about like sometimes too, like,
I get so stuck. Doom
yeah,
scrolling.
yeah. And
Brutal.
it's just like, comparison is the thief of joy.
Ah,
It really
yeah,
is,
it
because
is.
like, you got to understand, like, everybody's paths are different. Like, I read a
Mm-hmm.
story about like the guy who wrote Rush Hour. He
Yeah.
was like 40 something and was like in other people's eyes like a failure up until that moment, but
Yeah.
he just stayed like resilient, kept kind of going. Sure enough, he gets Rush Hour, big breakthrough, guy ends
Yeah.
up becoming a huge success story, and he's like 40 something.
Yeah.
Some people see success very, very early on,
Yeah.
and some people see it later on. And so
Mm-hmm.
you kind of have to just trust that, like, okay, like, everything's going to happen out on God's timing,
Yeah.
and I'm just going to continue to control what I can control,
Yeah.
and everything's going to work out for the best.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Absolutely.
How's it going to be to like edit your own stuff?
It's going to be weird. I'm going to be looking at myself and I'm going to be like, oh, I hate the way I look, or I hate the way I stuttered here.
Yeah, we can't do that though.
Yeah.
We're
Oh, it can't.
fearfully and wonderfully made.
Absolutely.
Absolutely,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
Mike, thank you. This
And
is just
thank
the
you so
beginning
much
of
for having
many.
me.
All
Yeah.
right.
Absolutely.